Alright, my friends, it's time to talk about the coronavirus again because this is a story and a virus that just won't die. Official number of confirmed cases as of recording is 31,530, with 31,213 of those happening on mainland China. Because of travel bans and so forth, there's no way places like Japan or Thailand or Singapore are still taking in people who have coronavirus from China. So the disease is probably taking hold in those locations locally, as in being transferred person to person there. Maybe not so much in the West. As you can see, Italy has 3, UK, Russia, Canada with 7, France with 6. And the honest truth is, regardless of how you feel about the Canadian medical establishment or the American medical establishment, the West is generally more able to handle this sort of thing than a place like China. Now, the Japanese numbers have been weirdly fluctuating all day, and that's because there's actually 60 people aboard a Japanese cruise ship, and coronavirus is aboard the ship, so they've basically just anchored the ship out in the middle of the ocean, and they're quarantining the whole thing. So for a while, the Japanese numbers were slightly inflated, but they're actually just off the coast, and they're not really in Japan, technically, so fair enough. But the ship has 3,700 people, because one guy from Hong Kong has the virus on the ship. But it's not just cruise ship shenanigans that are causing weird fluctuations in numbers. Here's some data from a hospital in Wuhan, and because the text is rather small and there's quite a bit here, I'll just sum it up for you. Nearly 1 in 3 patients at this Wuhan hospital are healthcare workers themselves. So doctors and nurses, you assume the people that are able to maybe wear face masks or work with the sick with as little chance as possible of getting infected, at least compared to a regular person who's working with the sick. They're still getting infected at a rate of 29%. That's almost 1 in 3. And since we're on the topic of the numbers, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. And at the same time, this is a weird link with the whole gaming Blizzard China story from a few months ago. Tencent may have accidentally leaked real data on the Wuhan virus deaths. Tencent briefly listed 154,023 infections and 24,589 deaths from the coronavirus. As many experts question the veracity of China's statistics for the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak, Tencent over the weekend appeared to inadvertently release what is potentially the actual number of infections and deaths, which are far higher than the official figures, but eerily in line with predictions from a respected scientific journal. They actually did this 3 times. I don't know if it's like a disgruntled employee or something, or someone who wants to get the message out to the rest of the world of what's going on with the coronavirus. Or who knows, it could be a hoax. It could always be a hoax, right? But the fact that it happened 3 separate times, and that it's in line with the outside estimates of the transmissibility of this thing, it makes you think. Also, to be honest, is anyone seriously trusting China at this point? Come on, guys. Come on. I mean, we already know that China spent the crucial first days of the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak arresting people who posted about it online and threatening journalists. No one is surprised that China would lie regarding the official numbers. And we are really seeing the power of the Chinese surveillance state at work here. If you have a Wuhan ID, even if you fled before the lockdown, you're doomed. No hotels will allow you in. No petrol station will sell gas to you. If you go to a Beijing hospital with a Wuhan ID, you will be pushed away. What can you do? Do you remember when we all said that the Chinese social credit score system was a terrible idea? And you know how all the far leftist idiots in the West really wanted one here? This is what you would fucking get if that's what happened. You would get this monstrous system where you can be tracked anywhere you are. And should the government turn tyrannical enough, they will most certainly use it against you. Of course, information is not the only thing being quarantined. Guangzhou City, 14 million population, is now locked down. All residential blocks are isolated from each other. So far, around 400 million people are locked down in China to contain the coronavirus. It's not a lockdown at this point, then. Like, you might as well just lock down the entire country or the entire planet. However, despite the People's Republic of China's best efforts, information is still getting out. There are still Chinese people who want freedom, or at the very least want the world to know what's going on. I'm not going to play these videos at length because I'm sure we've all seen them at this point. They've been floating around and going viral repeatedly, constantly. You've got videos of doctors talking about the actual grim situation, testimonies of how people are just lying around hospital hallways, or corpses are being burned en masse. You've got videos of people being stopped by the police, then their ID checked, then they're gathered up and forced into quarantine. And despite China's tendency to basically save face and not talk about the truth at all whenever something goes down, an official told the New York Times that China is treating the situation as if it were wartime conditions. And if that's what the official party line is, you know it has to be way worse than that. And if it's way worse than wartime conditions, man, things have to be bad over there. Even the Global Times, China's official mouthpiece in the West, is bracing Western industry and Western economy for a pretty big downturn in production due to the coronavirus. They have to know this is going to seriously affect them. Even the WHO, which to be honest is pretty much bought by China at this point, has finally admitted that it made a massive mistake in downplaying the coronavirus. Everyone's finally coming together and saying, no, this is serious. Everyone but the social justice warriors, of course.
We live in Toronto, where the SARS virus got world-scale attention. That's because the only people who died outside of Asia from that virus were in Canada, and most of them were in Toronto. With only 44 people dying in total in Canada, it had a huge impact on our city. We lost a lot of tourism, we lost millions of dollars, but most importantly, we saw a lot of stigma and racism towards Chinese people. It's important that we do not repeat those racist notions that happened here in Toronto, and we all need to be aware of this when we talk about the current coronavirus. We need to listen to and trust public health professionals, and we need to not overreact, and we need to not use this as an excuse to be racist.
Yeah, it's racism. That's it. I mean, Chinese isn't a race. And we're not talking about the race of people, we're talking about the cultural practice of eating animals that probably shouldn't be eaten by humans because they're going to transmit to us some pretty terrible rare diseases. But forget about that. It's all just racism, and you better shut up. I bet if you told a social justice warrior about China's actual racism, their heads would probably explode. There's a reason that Finn was kept off the Star Wars posters, you know? But you know what? China Daily is reporting that traditional Chinese medicine is actually effective at treating the coronavirus. Snort the rhino horn powder, you bigot. Okay, we've kind of been goofing around so far, but let's actually talk about some serious science here, at least as far as a layman like me can understand it. There is still the theory floating around that the coronavirus is somehow linked to the Chinese bioweapon program that actually had labs in Wuhan. It's possible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. Additionally, people are starting to lose their minds over this paper that came out of India recently, where they basically said that they were studying the coronavirus and they discovered that there are some protein sequences or something that are similar or identical to the ones found in HIV. And in fact, because of this, some HIV medication might actually be effective at combating the coronavirus. This doesn't necessarily mean that the virus itself is a modified form of HIV, nor does it mean that it's just as potent or deadly or scary or whatever, because, to be honest, even from a layman's perspective like mine, I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of things in the natural world that at least share some protein sequences. It could quite literally be random chance, and this might mean nothing. But hey, it might not. Especially since it came out that an infant in Wuhan has tested positive for coronavirus just 30 hours after birth. It could be the case that they simply got an infection from being in the hospital where there might have been coronavirus patients there, or it might actually be the case that the infection could be contracted in the womb. At the same time, I'm actually curious to see what the racial makeup is of people who have contracted the coronavirus outside of China, because there also seems to be some evidence that Asians are actually at a much higher risk of contracting it. Though I'm sure just asking that question probably makes me a racist somehow. Even as the scientists do their thing, the rest of us just seem to be spinning off into crazy town. For example, horseback knight in armor guards the entrance to a Chinese village in bid to stop anyone with coronavirus from bringing in the infection. Holy shit. Look at this guy. This is some Dark Souls shit here, dude. Don't drink bleach. 4 myths about the coronavirus and how to spot them. Was somebody even trying to drink bleach? Like, did someone actually say, hey, you know what? I got the coronavirus. Maybe I'll just clean it out of me. I crossed off China and changed it to Hong Kong. Chinese student brags about sneaking into Australia. This is just as bad as that woman who went to Paris earlier. These people honestly need to be charged with, like, spreading a bioterrorist weapon or some shit. This is getting ridiculous. Woman frightens rapist by coughing and saying she was from Wuhan. The would-be rapist was deterred by the possible threat of coronavirus. Take that, rape culture. Eat the bat soup, you bigot. And here's one from my home of Canada. Infect me, daddy. Queen's University student trustee resigns after attending coronavirus party. Students at the virus-themed party drank Corona beer and wore face masks. You know, if this student did this back in the 2000s, he could have gone on to have a stunning political career like after Justin Trudeau's blackface. Chinese sex workers say they are being discriminated against because of coronavirus and have forced to slash their rates by half. Listen, I've said it like 3 times this video already. You have to eat the bat soup, especially if it's in her vagina. Okay. Okay, let's get serious for a bit. The coronavirus whistleblower doctor dies, sparking an outpouring as well as censorship on Chinese social media. Li Wenliang was the first leaker of knowledge of the coronavirus, and it turns out in his efforts to help people recover from it, he has since died. He was one of 8 whistleblowers who were reprimanded by Chinese state police for allegedly spreading illegal and false information about the virus. On Weibo, the Chinese government's official social media platform, the hashtag #IWantFreedomOfSpeech started trending, and it was very quickly censored. However, this is the latest news on Li Wenliang, because this is just updated 4 hours ago. It's from today. He actually died several days ago. However, again, in order for the Chinese government to save face, he was put on life support, and the media was forced to change its reporting, including, apparently, BBC Chinese? Isn't the BBC funded by the UK, not the Chinese state? Nonetheless, they changed their reporting from dead to critically ill. Holy fuck, if there was ever a reason to defund the BBC, this would be it, isn't it? You know, on the one hand, you have a lot of people who are saying that this is going to be the next Black Plague, this is going to be the next Spanish flu, that there's going to be millions dead, humanity is going to be culled, like half of us are all going to die or some crazy nonsense. And then there's the other half who are saying that it's just a cold, bro. You shouldn't worry about it, that all this reporting doesn't matter. That all this BS is just people stirring up trouble, scaremongering, etc. I actually am taking a middle approach to this, and really, at this point, if you know me, you shouldn't be surprised by that. I'm not necessarily like a radical fence-sitter like Boogie or Mundane Matt or something, but I do think that there is a middle road here that is reasonable. For example, firstly, we cannot trust the Chinese government's reporting on any of this. For example, this article was from a year ago, but it's still relevant. Apparently, as I understand it, the unofficial numbers of January flu deaths in mainland China was nearly the same as the official numbers of total flu deaths for all of 2018, all 12 months, as well as exceeding the combined flu deaths for 2016 and 2017. China is obviously downplaying this as much as humanly possible to put themselves in the best light they can. At the same time, people who are comparing this to like flu deaths or whatever, they're not quite getting the point. There's no native resistance to it in the human population at all. I mean, maybe something will come out of it with that HIV investigation or the whole it only affects Asian people thing. Who knows? But for now, we have nothing. We have to wait for basically the virus to either burn itself out and kill a lot of people in the process, or we have to hope that in nature, an asymptomatic variant, like a mutation, crops up and begins inoculating people without actually spreading the virus itself. That's what happened to Ebola. We didn't actually stop Ebola, we just got lucky with it. However, this thing seems to be significantly more transmissible as well as more deadly than SARS was. There's possible evidence that it can be transferred from mother to child. There's possible evidence that the virus can exist on surfaces for a week at a time. So if somebody like sneezes on a door at the grocery store and they have coronavirus, and you walk by a week later and like you touch the door and then you like rub your mouth or something, you've got it. We have evidence that it takes up to 2 weeks for symptoms to even appear, and during those 2 weeks, you can also pass the virus on. We've got evidence that the symptoms themselves take 2 to 3 weeks to actually work through. And we've also had people die from this that weren't the very old, the very young, or the already sick or injured, but people who were perfectly healthy and in their prime. This is not the same situation as previous high-profile viruses. Here, consider this. What if this thing turns out to actually not be all that deadly, a death rate of around the same percent as flu, but it becomes endemic? What that means, by the way, is it becomes a situation where it just stays in the human population and it flares up once a year like the cold or the flu or something. It's just another virus that we have to deal with. Humanity had a long list of STDs to deal with before AIDS came in, and it just added to the misery. It's almost like as we eradicate old diseases, new ones start to come take their place. At this point, I don't think you can avoid catching coronavirus. Like, if it's going to come to your city and it's going to infect more than, like, say, one person in the local hospital who's, like, under quarantine, if it actually breaks out a bit in your city, you're probably just going to catch it. And you know what? It probably won't kill you. You might just have to lie up in bed for a few weeks with ibuprofen and, hope it passes on its own. Because especially if it's taking over the entire city, there's no way you're getting a hospital bed. However, hey, after you've got it and it passed, you're probably inoculated, unless for some reason you can re-catch it, which would be devastating. And there's also a strict economic argument to discuss here. If you have, say, 20% of your population infected, and they're bedridden for a month, what do you think that does to your economy? I mean, obviously money's not more important than lives, but at the same time, it's something that you can't really look over because the manpower matters, especially if part of that manpower should be used to fighting the virus. If all of your doctors who are actually capable of treating coronavirus get sick with it, you're kind of screwed. It might sound like I'm going doom and gloom on you. I'm not. I don't think this is the end of humanity or anything. Here's what I think you should do. At this point, the face mask, even the gas mask, is probably useless. What you should be doing is stocking up on some food. Stocking up on some basic supplies, in case the power goes out for a few days, in case you run out of food, in case the local supermarkets have like bare shelves and there's just no food left in your city, have a stocked pantry full of staple foods that you can just kind of subsist off of for a week or two if you have to. You don't have to go all tinfoil hat, you don't have to build yourself a bunker in your backyard and sit in there with a machine gun or something, while surviving off nothing but Steve 1989's collection of MREs or something. But make sure that you have like a sack of rice, a sack of beans, have some stuff in deep freeze if possible. Get yourself a fair quantity of food that will basically last for long periods in a cool, dry place, so that if there ever is actually a shortage of anything, you'll be prepared. And hey, you know what? If it doesn't actually happen, then just eat the food. It's not a big deal, right? There's one last thing worth talking about. YouTube has begun to put underneath every video that talks about the coronavirus a link to the WHO's official coronavirus page. They're like doing forced advertising basically on everyone's videos on this topic. At the same time, though, there are reports of various insider videos, like leaked videos or messages from doctors or whatever, actually being scrubbed from YouTube. Because as always with current YouTube, you just can't trust them to ever tell the truth. So there's actually a BitChute channel called CoronaChan. They are backing up every single coronavirus video that they can get their hands on. They have leaked footage dumps here. They have reports from people on the street. They have reports from doctors. Basically, if something is at risk of being taken down off YouTube, it's being archived here. I highly suggest that you sub to this channel, that you watch what they've got, and that if you do have anything that's a leak that might disappear in the future, somehow contact these guys and send it over to them. Just because YouTube hasn't been good for the past 5 years doesn't mean that the truth should be left in their hands. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Alright, my friends, take care of yourself out there and good luck. It'll be okay. I love you.